How's it going, everybody? My name is Ken Johns. Thank you for being here. If you're new to this channel, that's not very surprising, seeing as this is my first video on this new channel. On this channel, I'm going to be talking about a lot of topics that I find interesting, just kind of like dabbling in stuff that I'm excited about and sharing it with you guys, such as tech, photography, some parkour stuff, just a whole kind of blend of all of my interests. So if that's something that you find enjoyable, or you end up finding this video enjoyable, please consider subscribing, and I'm really excited to make more videos for you all. In today's video, we're going to be talking about ProRAW. Teased in Apple's October iPhone 12 event, ProRAW is a new file format for shooting images on certain iPhones aimed at higher level power users and professional photographers. While a lot of the specifics were not released at the time of the unveil, we did get some info then, but we've finally gotten our hands on the software and have been able to test it out. So today we're going to dig into everything about this new ProRAW feature, why it's a big deal, and whether you should be using it when you're shooting your own phone photos. ProRAW is a DNG or digital negative file. DNGs are used by camera companies to create high information images with as little compression as possible. Every camera brand has a little bit different RAW image they use in their cameras, so you can just think of ProRAW as Apple's version of that. While ProRAW shares a lot of the same iconic qualities that RAW files have, such as high dynamic range and the ability to push the black point and push the white point, Apple has included a lot of computational photography in there as well. ProRAW uses Apple's neural engine, which helps create your typical iPhone photos through methods such as exposure blending, deep fusion, etc. Now, all of this information is put into this file, but you can access that information afterwards when you're editing your raw DNG file. Now, why is Apple choosing to go this route versus a just pure raw, as uncompressed as possible file? The reason being is, unlike other camera brands, iPhone sensors are really small. These other camera brands like Sony and Canon have these really nice big sensors that they get tons of data on, and it's really easy for them to give you this nice file. Whereas Apple's iPhones have these really small sensors, so they're using computational photography to help pull as much data as you can out of that little sensor and give you a little bit more advantage over a uncompressed iPhone photo that's going to give you very, very little information. So basically, they're just trying to make up for the small sensor size in their iPhones. The goal being ideally to give you the best of both worlds in these files, both as much data as the iPhone can pull, and also trying to blend exposures together to give you that nice, as good as possible file. And if all of that explanation of ProRAW didn't quite hit, let's just go over a quick pro-con to understand what the use of these file formats are. What are the advantages of ProRAW? Firstly, you're going to get a much higher dynamic range. Apple's saying 14 stops of dynamic range, which seems pretty huge for a phone. What that means is you'll be capturing way more detail in the highlights and way more detail in the shadows. Now, what that means is if you have a scene where you have this really big disparity in brights and darks, a lot of times with a normal phone image, your phone's going to try to catch one of those two. It's going to have a really hard time spanning both. Either you can focus on the highlights or you can focus on the shadows, and then the highlights will be blown out or the shadows will be blown. Now with ProRAW files, you'll have much more access to both of those ends of the spectrum. Also, when you go to edit your file, you have so much more data than a normal iPhone photo, and so you have a lot more flexibility of what the file can do. I'm going to show you a little bit more about that later. What are the disadvantages of shooting ProRAW? Really, the biggest disadvantage is the file sizes. Apple's saying that each file is going to be around 25 megabytes. And so if you're shooting lots of photos all the time, those photos are going to stack up real fast. If you do shoot lots of iPhone photos, you may need to kind of pick and choose what things you want to shoot with RAW. Personally, the way that I'm going to handle that is airdrop all of my RAW files to my computer and then store those files on an external hard drive. So my iPhone won't be eating up storage all the time, but I can keep shooting those RAW files and getting the maximum I can out of my iPhone photos. I understand that most people probably don't shoot this way, but it is just something to keep in mind when you're shooting RAW photos, that these are going to take up a lot of storage space. Who can use ProRAW? For the foreseeable future, ProRAW is only available to iPhone 12 Pro and iPhone 12 Pro Max users. This is a feature that's rolling out to the public with the release of iOS 14.3. So if you have one of those two phones, go check your software updates and you should be able to go and access this feature right now. Now let's get set up so you can start shooting ProRAW. If you're using an iPhone 12 Pro or 12 Pro Max, go to your software update and go ahead and download iOS 14.3. Once you're running iOS 14.3, make sure you double check as always. Head over to your settings app and go to your camera settings and go ahead and turn on ProRAW. You actually have to go in and turn it on. It won't be on by default. Once you turn this feature on, the toggle will be on the top of the camera app, so you can still toggle on and off RAW files from the camera app. You don't have to go into the settings app to toggle on and off those RAW files. This makes it really easy to turn ProRAW on and off, so you're not blowing through your phone's storage all the time shooting everything. One thing I did find really annoying when I was out testing ProRAW is when I would leave the app, go do something else, maybe post an Instagram story, and then come back to the camera and try to shoot again, ProRAW would be toggled off even if I had it on when I was previously shooting. Luckily, I found a setting that lets the camera remember what your last choice was, so if you're shooting and leave the camera app and then come back to the camera app, it'll remember what your last choice was. But you have ProRAW enabled, the thing to do is to start shooting. Whether that's your pets, your food, coffee, your neighborhood, just start taking images and playing with them to see what you can do. I've been able to beta test ProRAW for a couple of weeks now, so I've been shooting with it a bunch, and let's go through some of my files that I've been shooting so that you can see what you can do with it. As you're looking through these images, you can see how versatile these files are, not only in the color, but in the retention of the highlights and the shadows. In some of these later images, you can see that I shoot really dark to preserve the highlight details, but then I can pull up the exposure when I'm editing and get a really nice balanced photo where I haven't lost detail on the highlights or the shadows. One of the things I was struggling with in my testing was when I was going to try to shoot low light photos, I was having a really hard time getting the camera to actually enact night mode, because the new hardware on the 12 Pro Max is a lot better than older iPhones, and it takes less light for it to get to that night mode setting. But you can see that even these low light photos taken well after sunset look really nice and have a lot of sharpness to them. The thing I wanted to point out about ProRAW is that I can use night mode with ProRAW. Unlike other RAW mobile photography formats, like the raw images that I'm getting out of the Moment app, I get to have a lot more noise reduction in the image itself before I even go to edit it. It's hard to see some of the image details on video, so if you're interested, check the description, and I'm going to leave a Twitter link that goes to a thread of a lot of these images that I took for this video. You want to be taking your ProRAW files and putting them into a photo editor. If you're not really planning to edit your photos, there's not really any advantage to shooting ProRAW. Any photo editing program that already supports DNG files is ready to go for your ProRAW files. So anything like Lightroom, Capture One, anything like that on your computer, you definitely can edit with. Now, I know a lot of people aren't going to be taking their iPhone photos and putting them onto their computer like me, and then editing them there, and then sending them back to their phone. I know that can be really tedious, but that's just how I like to do it. Mobile photo editors have gotten really good over the past few years, and so now a ton of them can access DNG files. So Lightroom Mobile, Darkroom, Visco, all of these programs and a lot more can access and edit your DNG files properly. If I'm just doing a really snappy quick edit and I just want a couple of things tweaked and I don't need to go through a whole editing session, I usually turn to Visco because it's just quick, easy, it's really intuitive. I love their products, I love their app. But if I'm going to sit down and really do some editing, I'll probably take those photos into Lightroom or into Lightroom Mobile. So in conclusion, ProRAW is a really fantastic way to turn up your mobile photography. If you're interested at all in trying to really push your mobile photos to the next level, this is a really, really great use case. I love ProRAW personally because it allows me to use the ease and quickness of the Photos app, which is really why I shoot photos on my iPhone to begin with. If I wanted to take a really slow, long processed photo, like just set up a tripod or something like that, I'm going to use a mirrorless camera or a DSLR. iPhone photos I really used as just like a in the moment, whip it out, bang, quick. And I found that a lot of other photo shooting apps, even if they have raw image capabilities, it's really slow and clunky. And by the time I get the apps open and I want to shoot with them, it's almost like I should have just pulled my camera out, it feels like. I'm really excited that I can access high quality raw files right within the Cameras app. It's just as quick as if I wanted to shoot a typical iPhone photo. And I think that's really where it shines. If you are someone that shoots a lot of photos on your phone and you need extra editing power and you have an iPhone 12 Pro or an iPhone 12 Pro Max, go test out ProRAW. It's a really awesome feature that I think is really going to help push your photos to the next level. However, if you're someone that shoots lots of iPhone photos, but you never really touch editing them, I would recommend you probably stay away from ProRAW or just try it sparingly. There's nothing wrong with trying it, but if you're shooting all of your iPhone photos that you're never going to edit, In ProRAW, you are just going to eat your iPhone storage and not be able to take a bunch more photos, and there's no real benefit to those files. I hope you learned a little bit from this video. If you found it useful, consider subscribing because I'm going to be putting out a lot more content like this. If you have suggestions on topics you'd like me to cover, definitely drop them in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. But anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic day. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.